Okay. Well, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. And I'm really happy we were able to get in touch. And one thing that I have I don't have kids. And so I don't have I'm useless when it comes to advice for all the moms in my community. So I really appreciate you doing this. I know that they're going to love it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love doing stuff like this. So I appreciate you, and I'm grateful for you for having me on here.
Awesome. Well, I know that you only have 35 minutes. So I prepared a bunch of questions. So I just want to go through them and maybe just get to as many as we can. But I have one question just to kind of start us off. And that is,
Okay.
and we'll probably get to some of this when you answer some of these questions, but just generally, I see so many people who are, really all for a plant-based diet, and they've seen wonderful improvements in themselves, and they've been able to lower their blood pressure and lower their cholesterol and get off from medications and reach a really healthy weight, and their skin clears up, and just so many things. And a lot of these same people are I don't know if this is good for my kids. And so
Right.
There's this kind of disconnect. And for me, I'm thinking, well, if it's good for you, it's going to be good for your kids. But of course, people are so, they don't want to put their kids in harm's way at all. And the other thing I see is these people who are coming off from more of a standard American diet who never thought about nutrition, all of a sudden when they're, transitioning to a plant-based diet, all of a sudden it's they get very worried about nutrition. So first of all, to start us off, can you just ease people's kind of fear about that?
Yeah, but let me just start by saying that, first of all, that's super normal. When I went plant-based, it was totally just an experiment, and I wanted to see what it would do for my body, and I was just very curious about it. And it did. It changed my whole life. And by the end of the 30-day experiment, I wasn't going back. But it took me another month of looking up medical literature and reading books to make sure that it was safe for my kids. And I'm a pediatrician.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I mean, if you can imagine a pediatrician who has medical knowledge was unsure, then most people are going to be too. So that's completely natural. And in fact, I interviewed Dr. Goldner a few weeks ago, and the same thing happened to her. She had changed her diet, basically reversed her lupus. But whenever she had kids, the pediatrician told her they have to have milk. And she was like, okay, that's just been so drilled into our heads that we get more scared that our children are going to have this horrible nutrient deficiency. But no, I want to calm everybody's fears and say, it's very healthy, and kids naturally lean towards eating a plant-based diet anyway. The first foods that we give them are whole plant foods. We're just giving them single ingredients. We're giving them bananas and avocados and squash and spinach and stuff like that. And it's not until later that we start giving them all the other stuff, and then we think, okay, well, maybe if we don't give them that, their bones are going to disintegrate,
Right. Yeah, perfect. So, okay, that's a great opening then. And we'll see a lot of those questions coming up. So the first question is, this is from my grandma, and she says, how do I get my grandbabies to eat this way when they already have a taste for junk food?
Okay, that's a wonderful question. I get that all the time. And Grandma, thank you so much. I really appreciate the older retired generation that they're they're gung-ho about changing their diets, and they really care about their grandkids. And I would just say, just like anybody else that you're trying to transition that's resistant, do it in a way that's kind of sneaky. Don't pull the rug out of, underneath anybody. Just don't even say anything. Just start changing things up. So whenever you have them over with you, make black bean brownies instead of regular brownies, or make, cookies that are made from whole foods and sweetened with dates instead of sugar, and just slowly start. You don't even have to mention it. And they will, because it's good. The food is delicious. So they will eat those foods. And then as they start to acquire more of those flavors, maybe you can talk more to parents about changing, because if they're spending the majority of time with parents that don't support this way of eating, it is going to be difficult to change them over 100%, but you can just do what you can do. And there's so many tricks to make the food just as delicious as junk food, but of course more wholesome and nutritious.
Yeah, I like that part about just kind of sneaking it in there. I think that works wonders, because oftentimes if they know it's, if they know that it's a lot of veggies, they're automatically resistant to it. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And that happens to adults too, because like if you take something to work and you say, "Hey, everybody, I brought vegan whatever," people are like, but if you just say, "I brought brownies," and they're gone in like 5 minutes,
Yeah, totally. Ignorance is bliss. All right, so let's talk about plant-based milk, because this was a big one, and I actually watched one of your YouTube videos about this a little bit. And so the original question was the best plant-based milk to give to a 1-year-old and why. So let's hear it.
Okay, so I wouldn't say that there is no best. Once, it kind of depends on where you're coming from. If you're still breastfeeding, you don't have to give them anything once they're weaned from the breast. And I would like my patients to be off the bottle and off formula by 13 months of age. And this is for normally developing children that have normal growth and development. Of course, there might be some differences for children that might have pervasive developmental disorders or other issues. But for normal developing kids, off the bottle, off formula by 13 months of age. And really, ideally, I would like them weaned to water. But if you want to have a plant-based milk because of whatever reasons, like they just still need that little sippy cup of milk before a nap or something like that, then any unsweetened plant milk is fine, because I'm not relying on that beverage to be their source of nutrition and calories. They should be eating for those nutrition and calories. And then, of course, using any unsweetened plant milk for any recipes or to make smoothies and any of that kind of thing is good. There are some people that get concerned about calorie intake for children. And in that case, you just want to make sure that for those eaters that they just eat very small amounts and they don't tolerate a big volume of food, you just want to make their food more dense. So make sure you're getting some avocados in there, getting nut butters in there, things like that. And then if you feel like you need a few extra calories, then look for a plant milk that's richer in calories. The ones that are going to be richer in calories are going to be your soy milks. I like the West Soy brand that has no additives and it's just soybeans and water. I understand some people are leery of soy. I don't think that we need to be worried, but for those, rice milk is a little bit higher in calories, but it's because they put oil in there. That's one of the reasons. But of course, you can make your own milk at home and just make it a little bit richer. Like you can make cashew milk or hemp milk at home, and then that's going to have a little bit more calories in there. But the answer to your question is there is no best. If you're going to choose one, make sure it's unsweetened, and it should not be what you're relying on for your child's caloric intake.
Yeah, and water is key. And that's great because then it gets kids used to drinking water instead of drinking something else.
That is the healthiest beverage. That's really what they should be drinking throughout the day. I don't want it affecting their teeth. I don't want it affecting their weight, because it could cause poor weight gain as well, because if they're drinking something with calories all day, it takes away their appetite to eat real food. But it can also lead to weight gain, because not only are they sometimes drinking that, but then they're also eating. And so really that should be a minor thing, and they should be drinking water most of the time.
Awesome. Okay. Very clear. All right. So how about this one? My toddler is super picky. He would eat peanut butter on toast with blueberries for every meal if I let him. He is particularly shy about veggies, which is where the most micronutrients are, right? If they are picky eaters, what about enough nutrients? And this question is actually repeated a lot of times. So, all the plant foods, we know that, I know that we need to give them all the plant foods, but what if they don't eat all the plant foods? And then what if they miss out on nutrients?
That is a great question. And just to know that they're not going to stay like that forever, first of all. And it's okay for them to be repetitive at the beginning. It's not one of those things that last forever. But if we get super stressed out and anxious about it, and then we're always just like, eat this, then they feel more anxious, and then they're going to be more resistant. Just like I said before, you can be sneaky about things. You can make your own nut butters. You can put other stuff into the nut butters, more omega-3s, put some flax seeds, put some chia seeds, those kinds of things. Change up what kind of bread they're using. But really, it's very normal for toddlers to be, quote, picky. I really think that pickiness is kind of like an overused term. Toddlers love life more than they love to eat. And that's normal. And that's a good thing. I mean, they're just exploring their environments. They're like, food is just like an afterthought. And usually it's not till like when they get really hungry. They would rather play because the world is just so exciting. And I feel like we need to support that and foster that. Whenever they're hungry, we offer them the food. If they choose to eat it, they can, and they can decide if and how much they want to eat until they're hungry again. But I think we stress out too much about how much they eat. And sometimes I think we stress out about too much about what they're eating. My younger child is a little bit more selective, and he tends to eat the same things over and over again with some variety in other meals. But I'm not worried about it as much because I've relaxed about it. He's more accepting of new foods. And I think that happens to toddlers too. Once they get over like the whole, like, the world is just so exciting and fun, you just keep introducing new foods and they will accept them, especially if we're not stressed out about it. If we present it to them in this place of openness and non-attachment, I think that they kind of like, they relax a little bit too, and they're more willing to try things. So just be patient. And believe me, I've talked to a lot of plant-based experts who have kids that are all kinds of everything. The ones that eat everything and the ones that wouldn't touch a bean, like, what's her name? Esselstyn's daughter. I can't remember her first name. Anyway, her son wouldn't touch a bean till he went to college, and they're plant-based guru experts. So kids are going to be different. We just have to be patient, and they're going to be okay. So I'm not super worried about it.
So in that instance, like if a kid just, let's say, just won't eat beans, just like refuses to eat beans, and beans are a really great source of protein, right? Would you then like introduce some kind of like plant-based protein powders into like a smoothie, or like would you compensate for that in any way, or just not worry about it?
No, the main thing is just to ensure that they're getting enough calories, enough calorie intake. So you can do that with other whole foods. So if they don't eat beans, then nuts and seeds, whole grains. And there are some people that can't eat beans because they have allergies and intolerances. And it's not going to, ideally we'd like to be able to eat beans. And you should keep trying if there isn't an allergy or intolerance, and try them in all different forms, and in dips and in soups and in spreads and in everything. But if not, then just be creative about other ways to get calories from whole plant foods.
Right. And I think there's an emphasis across the board about like protein. I think that falls, that is with children as well. But I think that's great what you said, like try it in different formats, like blend some white beans in broccoli soup, and like no kid is going to notice that. So being creative in the ways in which you present them, I think is a great suggestion.
Exactly.
So yeah, perfect. Okay. So let's talk about, somebody asked about giving their children multivitamins and B12. So it's kind of two separate questions. So can we talk about like B12 first? And I guess the supplements that adult plant-based eaters would lean towards, so the B12 and the D and possibly the DHA and EPA. Are those the same? Like, do kids need those same ones, or do they need additional vitamins?
Great question. For sure, B12. If you're going to raise a plant-based child, please do not neglect the B12. They need it. We need it. And I have a video on this on Veggie Fit Kids as well. But you can either do a multivitamin daily. And I really like Dr. Furman's vitamins. I like that he's really put effort into making sure that it has the things that we may lack, but get rid of the things that could be toxic. So I like those. He has different forms for kids. So you could do a daily multivitamin. If you don't want to do a multivitamin, then you can do a B12 by itself. If you want to do a daily, just get a low dose. Usually it's hard to find smaller than 500 micrograms. So I just say 500 micrograms per day, or you can do a larger dose 2 or 3 times a week, like 1,000 to 1,500 for kids. Vitamin D is one of those things that we're getting more and more evidence that, both ways, whether it's helpful, whether it's not helpful. There are several people, no matter from what part of the world, that end up being deficient, and we don't understand all of that yet. But we know for sure that in certain parts of the country, we don't get enough sunlight, even if we try. Like here in Washington State, you would have to be outside in the middle of the day during the winter for 2 full hours, arms and legs fully exposed to get enough vitamin D. And nobody's going to do that. So I do recommend my patients supplement at least half of the year, the part of the year that we have less sunlight. So there's lots of places around the country like that. So it doesn't hurt to supplement vitamin D as well. And like I said, that could even be through the multivitamin or a separate vitamin, 400 to 600 international units per day. Omega-3, that one goes back and forth too. I supplement my omega-3. I supplement my kids' omega-3. My older son does have a diagnosis of ADHD. I consider it a brain difference, not a disorder, but I do feel that his brain type probably does benefit from having that supplemented and having some foods and whole plant foods that are higher in fat. I think he just thrives better at that level. And so I do supplement myself and my kids. I use a vegan DHA EPA supplement. It doesn't hurt to do it, but I would say let's keep an eye on the literature and see how that changes and evolves and whether it's something that we really need, and hopefully it won't harm us. I think that there's less studies showing that there's any harm, especially if you do a vegan one that isn't contaminated with mercury.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you do Dr. Furman's spray on that one as well?
No, I do Omega Zen because the studies for the kids at ADHD needed to be a higher dose than what Dr. Furman's is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ended up being cheaper to do that than to double up on the amount of Dr. Furman. So we just do Omega Zen. We do the liquid just under the tongue. Everybody just swallows it every morning. So it's no big deal.
And I get this question a lot, and let's just put it out there to end it. Okay, so if between a spray and like a sublingual, does it matter? Are people overthinking this as far as the B12 goes?
I don't think it does. I haven't seen any evidence that it does. Just do whatever you're going to do. Do whatever you're going to be willing to take. So I usually tell my patients either sublingual or spray, whichever one you want, that's fine. We do, when we were doing just the B12 by itself, we were doing sublingual, but now we do the multivitamins and then the omega-3 separate.
Okay. Gotcha. Here's one about kids. Okay, so the question was kids and the milk issue bone calcium arguments. So I guess not having strong bones if they don't drink that milk.
Right. And this is the main concern that people have and that other pediatricians have for kids not, drinking cow's milk. We can get plenty of calcium with a plant-based diet. Of course, the biggest sources are going to be in your beans and your greens. You can also have calcium fortified products like your plant milks, orange juice, things like that. But what I tell people is that the main thing is that we have to do weight-bearing exercise. And kids are usually great at this. There's no problem. They're jumping all over the place. They're climbing things. They're in sports. But that is really, it's the stress that we put on our bones that helps make them stronger. That's what helps build our bones and form our bones. So we do need adequate calcium. But the thing that makes our bones the strongest is going to be weight-bearing exercise. So I would say to people, don't overthink it, don't worry about it, and also know that the studies that have the highest amount, the populations that drink the most milk actually have the highest amount of bone fractures. So I don't really think that it's really being protective anyway, and I think that the risks of consuming dairy are greater than any benefits that they give to us.
Good. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Go put your kids outside and let them play and jump around and use those bodies instead of sitting in front of a screen. It's another reason.
Bars, all the stuff that we're supposed to not do anymore because it's dangerous or whatever. That's what they should be doing.
Yes. Okay. So kids and protein for proper growth and development.
So I have a blog post and video on this as well as far as what's required, but it's just so little that you just basically just make sure that they're eating enough calories and talk to their pediatrician about their growth charts and make sure that they're growing on their curve. That's one thing that's misunderstood is growth charts and percentiles and all that kind of stuff, because everybody's going to be on their own curve. So as long as they're growing on their own curve, they're eating sufficient calories, they're eating enough protein. I mean, the protein really is not a concern.
Okay, good. From the doctor herself. All right, let's talk about, here's one. I was told to keep an eye on my toddler's iron levels. If she is eating a whole food plant-based diet, is this a big concern? What food combinations, food prep methods are best for iron?
Okay, that's a great question. Vegans and vegetarians don't have any more iron deficiency anemia than the general population. Okay, so this diet does not put you at extra risk. However, iron deficiency worldwide is one of the most common nutrient deficiencies there are. I would say that you're probably more likely to be iron deficient if you're eating a standard American diet with a bunch of processed food and that kind of thing. So same as calcium, it's going to be beans and greens, and absorption is improved with consuming it with vitamin C, which is in most fruits and vegetables. So most of the time that you're mixing things together, you're getting both of them in. And so I would focus on making sure that if your doctor said that your child's iron's a little bit low, to make sure that they're getting beans in their diet every single day and have it along with some fruit. And, over time that helps. Another trick too to use is blackstrap molasses, 1 to 2 tablespoons a day. It is very strong in flavor. So putting it into the oatmeal or stirring it into something else. But that is also a good source of iron to try to almost like using it as a supplement without having to actually use iron tablets.
Okay. Yeah. And a lot of this stuff for the nutrients anyways, it's the same stuff that I hear for adults. And so it sounds to me like it really is like what's good for you is good for your kid. Are there any kind of exceptions to that?
Well, one of the things, and I kind of been alluding to this during the whole time, but one of the things that can be different in kids, especially smaller kids, is that their stomachs are really small and they don't have the patience or the time to sit down and eat like big raw salads or a lot of raw foods. Yeah. So you do want to emphasize the more calorie dense plant foods like the whole grains and the beans and the nut butters, especially for those that they don't eat big amounts. You don't have to stress about it, because I feel like most kids regulate until we like brainwash them to keep eating more and more and more. Until then, they regulate their appetites pretty well and know when to start and when to stop. But don't expect your kid, especially small kids, to sit down and eat like a big salad. Now, there are some kids that naturally they just love raw foods and they would prefer to eat like raw broccoli. I've met those kids before. Yes. I have families like that. It's amazing. And for those, sometimes we do have to encourage them. It's like the opposite of the other. We do have to be like, okay, eat some of these beans first before you eat a bunch of that raw broccoli, because, they may have a little bit of more difficulty with their weight gain. I don't stress about it as much as other pediatricians do, though, because I think that their body is telling them what to do. And as long as they're developing well and they're otherwise healthy, then it's not a big concern. But that's the main thing, is to just know that we should not be focusing on just a bunch of raw, low calorie density veggies for the littler ones. We really should be looking more at the fruits, the whole grains, the beans, and the nuts and seeds.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Okay, so let's see. Will being vegan affect puberty in any way? I have 2 preteens, 1 boy and 1 girl.
I think that it affects it in a good way, because we know that dairy might be one of the causative factors in early puberty. And I talk to families about this. I talk to them about girls that have really painful periods and that kind of thing. But other than that, no, it doesn't. I don't really think it has any effects that we need to be concerned about. Definitely no ill effects. And I don't think there's any huge differences as far as when we reach puberty. There's other things in our environment that we probably need to be thinking about and paying attention to, which people probably know about that, but it's the plastics, because they can be endocrine disruptors, and they may also be part of the culprits in what's causing early puberty in some of our girls. But the more you can do to eat a whole food plant-based diet, make sure they're getting adequate sleep, make sure that they're getting adequate exercise, then really the puberty should be genetically normal for them, which is similar to what mom and dad were.
Okay, perfect. Here's a question, and this question came up a lot. So I keep hearing that kids need more fat than adults. Is this true? My 7-year-old won't eat nuts. What are some other good sources of fat if the above is true?
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it has to do with calories. So I think evolutionarily wise, we've always been drawn to fat because it's so dense in calories. And if we're going to maybe embark on a famine soon, we want to make sure that we have enough fat storage. So probably we're attracted to fat and we'll eat more fat when it's around. But I just think that kids need to have adequate calories, and our bodies know what to do with that. We make our own cholesterol. So anything that we need for our brain, we make it ourselves. Now, that being said, I did allude to my son and ADHD and some of these other brain differences that maybe they tend to thrive more on those more dense foods. And part of it could just be that they just need more calories. So whenever they eat those dense foods, it's able to hold over for longer. So I would just take each kid in an individual basis and just pay attention to how they're doing. How are they doing in school? Are they sleeping well? Do they seem to be thriving and developing well? Then I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Mm-hmm. Good Good. Easy enough. I think, yeah, it's easy to overthink this stuff because people's kids are like their life. I get it.
Absolutely. But then it causes a lot of stress and anxiety, and I think that it takes away from our joy.
Mm-hmm.
So really my whole message is we probably don't need to worry so much about things. Just feed your kids, whole foods, plant-based diet, and let them play.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the main message I have.
Yeah. Easy enough. I like it. So here's a question is, it's about, will eating whole food plant-based create allergies or major sensitivities to non-whole food plant-based foods?
This is a valid question, and I do not know the answer to this, but I am in the process of writing a book, and I have reached out to some allergists, and we'll be asking them. And, a few years ago, I probably would have said, no, I don't think so. But perhaps there could be a reason to think about this a little bit further. And, I wouldn't still recommend you need to go out and eat eggs and dairy so that you don't develop anaphylaxis. I don't really think that that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to increase our risk of developing anaphylaxis. But there are some things with what's going on in the environment and chemicals and all that kind of stuff that may affect how we react to these foods later. But, the opposite question is true too. Sometimes people ask if, like for say some people that are getting off, they have gluten sensitivities and they're not eating wheat anymore. So now they're eating a ton of rice and they're eating rice chips and rice crackers and rice everything. Could they potentially develop a sensitivity? And yes, you could. You can develop a sensitivity to any food that is composed of any protein. But I don't know if for those parents that are concerned, if they never give their child eggs or dairy, could it make it so that if they were exposed to that, is it going to increase their risk later down the road? I don't know the right answer to that. So I'm going to ask a few allergists and you'll have to read my book to get the answer.
Good. Yeah. Awesome. So around that, so we had a question about peanut allergies and why there's so much more peanut allergies here in the US than anywhere else in the world, it seems. Do you have any clues about that?
Yeah, that's interesting. For a while, we thought it had more to do with the way that peanuts were grown and maybe some of the funguses that were around it. And we developed like these cross sensitivities to other proteins. But now they found that in countries where they introduced peanuts earlier, there is less risk of peanut allergy, and perhaps moms that consumed peanut butter during pregnancy, those babies had less risk of peanut allergy. And so that's what made me rethink this whole thing of like, okay, well, maybe it is possible that if you avoid something, it'll make it more likely for you to develop an allergy. So now we've completely changed, because we used to say, don't give your child any peanuts until they're over 1. And now we're just saying the exact opposite. We're saying introduce it by the time they're around 6 months old. And I'm having my parents introduce peanut butter to their babies so that it decreases their risk of developing anaphylaxis.
Interesting. Awesome. Yeah, good to know. That's going to be really, really helpful. Okay, that was the fat question. We covered that. Acceptable weight. I periodically panic that my kids are too skinny, which is ridiculous considering that obesity and diabetes are such an issue with kids, but I do worry that they may be too lean. Can you comment on that?
Yes. That's a great question. And yeah, our kids are going to be leaner than most kids because the obesity rate is going up every day in children. It's still rising in some populations, especially in preschoolers. They're like, the super obese is going up in that age. This is where growth charts are really important. So as a pediatrician, I spend a lot of time talking about growth charts and discussing growth charts with parents. It has to do with the kid's own curve. Between 9 and 15 months, they tend to find their own curve, where they're going to be on their curve. So say a kid is just 25th percentile, and that's where they're going to stay. As long as they're staying around their curve, then I'm not worried. If suddenly they start dropping off and they fall off the curve and they're below 3rd percentile, then I might be like, what's going on? Are they like super active, or, could there be an eating disorder if it's in a teen girl or a teen boy, things like that. But the other thing to consider is parents. So even though parents, after they've had kids, may not be lean anymore because of, our habits and stuff, I ask them, were you a lean kid? And often for the lean children, both parents would be like, yeah, we were super thin when we were kids. And so it's just genetics. And, over time, we learn to eat when we're not hungry and eat by the clock and eat at parties. And so as adults, sometimes we put on pounds when if we would have kept the same habits we had as kids, we probably would have still been lean. So two things, family history, but also the kid's own curve. So look at the curve. Are they staying on their own curve? Then that's just the way they're going to be. And I don't worry about it. And try not to compare to other children, because if you compare, like if you go to the, park and you're looking and all the kids, there's a lot of kids there that are going to be overweight and obese.
Great. Okay, so we're at 30 minutes, so we have just a few more questions. So I thought that this was a great question, and I don't know if there's an answer, but signs of needing more of something. So what to look for when your child isn't getting enough fat or greens or something? How will we know? I know it seems odd to worry about nutrients when whole food plant-based is so much better than the standard American diet, but I worry sometimes if I'm missing something and she needs and wonder how I would know, like Dr. Greger's daily does not, but for kids. So just how would you know if your kids are missing something?
Just like I said before, they're not growing and developing and thriving. There's something, they're not sleeping well, they're not doing well in school. Sometimes we can tie that back to nutrition, but there's so many factors in a kid's life, I think we're overthinking the whole thing, and let's just all relax and do them the best we can, because I don't think our parents worried this much about us. I really think that we're getting to a trend where we're like way over focusing on it. So everybody just take a deep breath. And if your kid is happy and they're playful and they're going to play dates and they're going to school and they're fine.
Yeah.
Just eat them when they're hungry. They can eat how much they want, stop when they're satisfied, and let them run off and play, and you go relax and do whatever you need to do.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if that's going to be a controversial answer or not.
No, I like it. I mean, I'm a big believer in not overthinking shit, and so I think that fits in perfectly. So is whole food plant-based appropriate and or helpful for school-age children with type 1 diabetes?
Yes, I think that it is. Now we have great technology with the pods and the continuous insulin, continuous glucose monitors that children have. Children with chronic diseases in general, I think we should be especially concerned about what they're eating, because once you have one autoimmune disease, it increases your risk of other autoimmune diseases. And children with type 1, we test them every 6 to 12 months. If they've developed celiac, or they could be getting inflammatory bowel disease. So we want to feed them the best nutrient-rich food that there is. And then because they are more sensitive, we just adjust things as we need to. So we see if they might be particularly sensitive to one of the foods, then you might want to hold back on that. But either way, for a child with type 1 diabetes, I think it's a good idea to make sure that they're eating healthy, whole foods. Either way, their body is going to react better to that than eating the standard American diet or eating cheese all the time. Because that's the thing that drives me nuts, is that for diabetics, they've gone into this thing where it's like cheese and meat, cheese and meat. And that's what they're eating because that's supposed to not trigger the need for insulin as much. But that's not overall going to be healthy, especially because they have increased risk of heart disease when they're older and all of that kind of stuff. So yes, it is appropriate. Just make sure you're working with your endocrinologist, and they usually have a nutritionist, and watch their numbers and adjust as needed.
Awesome. Okay, so that we just have like less than a minute left. So is there anything else that you want to share with my community and let people know that everything is going to be fine?
Yes. So thanks for having me. And I would just say to trust your child's intuition. Don't force feed them. That's like my number one rule. Let's stop force feeding kids. Let's relax. Let them eat their foods. Work with your pediatrician, particularly about knowing how they are in their growth charts and understanding growth charts, and have fun. Just have fun with it. Don't stress out people. It's going to be fine.
I love it. Thank you for your knowledge and for sharing it with me today.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And it was so nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay. Talk soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.